Good afternoon. I am the last stop on your journey, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the back end of what Betsy described in our editorial workflow and how we got about to integrating our video solution. So just as a little bit of a refresher, we do have 4 journals. 3 of them are online only, and 1 is print and online only. We publish twice a month in print for that one, and combined that's a total of over 2,000 submissions each year. Oh, yes, sorry. We do use an online submission and peer review process. For us, that's editorial manager, and we have a double-blinded peer review process as well. So the authors don't know who their reviewers are, the reviewers don't know who the authors are, and the editors know who everyone is. This is our basic peer review workflow for an unsolicited JBJS submission. The paper would come to us through editorial manager, and then we would give it a rather extensive technical check. From there, it goes on to an editor-in-chief who assigns it to one of our couple dozen deputy editors. He then sends it out for review to 2 or 3 reviewers. The reviews are submitted, and depending on the outcome of that, it gets sent on to a stats editor or a video editor. And then once those reviews are done, the paper goes back to a deputy editor, and then back to an editor-in-chief for the approval of the decision that he makes, and then we finally send out the decision for them. So in terms of video, the major problem that we had was that the file sizes were just too large for our submission system to handle at the time. We asked that the authors uploaded them as supplemental files, so they would be over a couple hundred megabytes each, and uploading them, the authors had trouble because sometimes their connections would time out if their computers weren't fast enough, and downloading them, we would have trouble downloading them. It would sometimes take 20 minutes. We'd go get a coffee, come back, it'd still be downloading. And we needed a very fast internet connection in order to handle that kind of size. We also needed a computer, which wasn't ideal for our editors, as many of them edit on the go. They use mobile devices, tablets, and it just didn't work out very well for them. And you also needed sometimes specific players based on what type of video you were looking at. For staff in particular, we also had to deal with long download times. We do view all of the content for blinding, so every video that an author uploaded, we would have to download and then view to make sure that everything was obscured so the viewers wouldn't know who the authors were. We did have some creative authors who would go outside the submission site. They would send us DVDs, or they would send us to their FTP site that would require a password that we didn't have, or institutional access, and then we'd have to talk to their tech support. It was a lot of fun. And then we'd also get a lot of complaints from editors and reviewers for just how much of a hassle it was to view the videos. So in terms of an illustration, this is where every time you see an icon, the video would have to be uploaded or downloaded, which was a lot of places, and it got very repetitive. So as Betsy just described, the solution for us was to go with Bytecove to store the videos on an external website. This allowed the reviewers and editors and staff to view the videos by clicking on a link, and on top of that we put a user-friendly author submission site, so it would be very easy for people to use. Consequently, the challenges that we faced as a result of that was how to get the authors to use the site, figuring out how to use it ourselves, and then trying to expand on the capabilities that we had looking forward into the future. So I'm going to run through a quick example workflow of the new method of submitting videos for us. This is a screenshot of Editorial Manager, and particularly the attached file screen. So when the author would choose the item type as video, they would be taken to the video submission site via a link. And this is the author in. So what they would see is a very simple interface. It's very clean. They can just enter in their title and the other metadata associated with their paper. From there, they can go to the upload screen where they can locate the file on their desktop. And once it uploads, the site will give you a URL. And it tells you, please go back into Editorial Manager to enter in that URL. So from there, they would just copy and paste the URL into the URL field in EM. And then once their PDF builds, they'd be able to click on the link, and then you could be taken to the video in the browser of your choice. Ta-da. Okay. So for us, it's gone very smoothly so far. The biggest advantage, obviously, is that there's no downloading needed, which allows for a much faster view time. We kind of suspected that a lot of reviewers and editors weren't viewing the video just because it was so much of a hassle, but now it's much easier for them to do so. They can do it on the go, they can do it on their mobile device, and they don't need anything other than an internet connection. So we have had virtually no complaints since we started this workflow. We did have several considerations when we were enacting this solution. two of the biggest ones was setting up the author side of the video submission site as well as configuring Editorial Manager. The screenshot, which you can't see, is the back end of EM and setting up the article type to make sure that for videos the author could only enter in a URL. Training, we had to look into training our authors, our editors and reviewers, and our staff. For authors in particular, we needed to teach them how to use the submission site as well as to let them know what kind of videos that we were looking for. For our editors and reviewers, we are still working on training them on how best to review videos, as it tends to be different from reviewing, say, a paper or a figure, and it's not as intuitive. So in terms of staff, we had to learn the site ourselves, both the front end and the back end in Brightcove, to learn how to assist our authors. And we are still working on how best to evaluate the videos for blinding. Sometimes it's not as obvious to see what might need to be blinded. So it's an ongoing training process and some of the back end considerations that I'll talk about in a little bit. These are some examples of the documentation that we've created so far. It's a lot of paperwork. We've worked on author video upload instructions. Right now, I think that's a PDF that is linked to from both Editorial Manager and from our instructions for authors. We also had to think about a different set of instructions for authors who were asked to upload videos after their paper had been accepted and was outside of Editorial Manager. There was some legal considerations regarding rights and permissions, and author video guidelines, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then also staff protocols. So the author video guidelines, these were mainly created by our video editor. He thankfully has a very in-depth knowledge of our core audience, which is orthopedic surgeons, and was able to create these standards to help them produce videos for us. And he splits them up into editorial, production, and technical standards, as well as things that are specific to surgical videos. So I'm going to run through them really quickly. In terms of editorially, he talks about the content and how it relates to the manuscript and making sure that it enhances whatever the manuscript is describing, making sure that the video that they're uploading is in compliance with HIPAA and that identifying patient information is obscured. Production-wise, he talks about when to use title cards versus narration, appropriate use of transitions and music, don't use any music, and surgically, he talks about orientation and the clarity of procedure, as the viewers will most likely be performing the procedure, so it's very important that they are oriented to it correctly. And then finally, technically, he talks about things such as resolution, duration, and then how big the video should be ideally. So one of the challenges that we faced was that the authors were a little reluctant to give us their videos as they didn't want to sign over the copyright. So because of that, we came up with a new form. This is our video license agreement. I don't expect you to read it. It basically allows the authors to sign over a limited license for us to use their videos, but they're allowed to maintain the copyright, so it gives them freedom to take their videos elsewhere and reuse them. Some of the ongoing considerations that we have is deleting videos from papers that have been rejected on the site. Unfortunately, it's not an automatic process, so we're working on a protocol so that our Brightcove backend isn't overrun with videos that we don't need. As I mentioned earlier, blinding is also a consideration. We need to make sure that we don't give away the patient's identity, the author's identity, or the institution's for our review process. We're still figuring out the best way to use our video editor. So far, he's been great with documentation help and reviewing the videos themselves. And one of the things that he's been working on a lot lately are the guidelines for peer review of video. So we asked him, what do you look for when you look at a video? And he basically split it up into two sections, technical and production, and then content. And these are some of the things that he looks at when he reviews a video. So it's not as intuitive as reviewing a figure or a table would be. So he checks to see about clarity, if there's captions, if the content is meaningful to the paper. This is just an example of one of his video reviews. And the highlighted text are the things that are kind of key points in his review. For this one, he says that the production value of the video is great, but it didn't have any narration. So in this case, we would send it back to the authors and ask them to upload a new video that had narration. Finally, some of the things that we are doing to help encourage the use of video is we are bringing it to the forefront by issuing an editorial, which we did at the end of last year. This was written by our video editor and our editor-in-chief. It talked a little bit about our online capabilities and the fact that we could stream it online, and we had a call for video, basically. And our newest development right now is that we're working on a video-only article type. So this is a first for us. And we are planning on doing it with our surgical technique journal just because it's a natural fit. We do want to make sure that it's peer-reviewed video. And right now we're in the process of talking to an advisory panel of orthopedic surgeons as well as a focus group in a couple weeks. This is just a draft of what we think the workflow will look like for this new article type. Instead of a manuscript, we would ask the authors to submit a storyboard that would take the place of a template right now form in a Word document, and the storyboard would be submitted through Editorial Manager, where it would then undergo peer review. So before the author shoots any video, we would review it first, and then if it survives that process, it would then be given the green light to film. So then they would film the actual video and then resubmit it through EM. They would use the video submission site to upload their video and then put everything back through the system where it would then undergo reviewers. Our video editor is working on a video on how to make video. That'll probably take the place of our author video guidelines. It's just a more illustrative example of what we're looking for. And finally, we're still finalizing the deletion protocol for videos that have been rejected. These are just some helpful tips and lessons that I've learned along the way. I would recommend, if you are considering instituting a similar workflow, to be sure to document everything to make sure that you have protocols in place so your staff knows what to do, and your authors definitely could appreciate the guidance. Usability testing is great, especially for the author video submission site. We definitely took a lot of time trying to submit videos through the site ourselves and also trying to break the site, which we did. And it helps, it makes the site better, and it prevents problems. I would definitely recommend keeping it as simple as possible for the authors. If you give them the option to upload a file or to upload a URL, they will probably do the wrong thing and upload a file. So I would recommend using just the URL submission method if that works for you. And then finally, if you have the time and the resources, train your staff on the back end, the Brightcove site, as well as Editorial Manager configuration, so that way they're able to handle problems as they arise. That's it. So thank you. I think we're going to do general questions.
Looks like we have about 10 minutes for questions, so you might want to pose them to our queens from JBJS or the panel as a whole. And if we